Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we will be discussing about globalization, which means changing color languages in WPF. I have opened up Visual Studio. I'm creating a new project. You can start with any project that you want. It can be a .NET Core or anything. I'm starting with the WPF app, .NET framework. It can be any framework as well. Let me start with 7.2. So the basic idea behind globalization is that in any WPF or Windows Phone project, there will be a system or a current UI culture. So the culture can be by default the culture will be in English, and if you want, you can change your culture. So how do you know that what is your culture? Let me go back to this app.xaml. So by default, it will be trying to open main window.xaml. So let me remove this and let's try to start up using an event. A startup instead of the URI, I'm going to call an event so that I can handle what to open and what not to open. So let's say main variable window is equal to name main window and window dot show data. So this is pretty much how it was before. Instead of us writing an event to call this, the app.xaml was directly calling the startup event. So now what I'm doing here is before even this startup was called, I need to do some methods where I can control my languages. Let me first minimize it here a little bit. Okay, so what you need is you need the namespace system.threading, and from here thread dot current thread. So whatever is your current u thread, you will have UI culture and then you will have current culture. So to if you change both the values to new value, like if you do not set anything, then the value will be invariant culture or English. If you set this value specifically or deliberately, then that culture will be changed. So how do we achieve it? So without even going forward to changing the cultures or changing the languages, first let us try to set up different resources. For that purpose, in this UI that we have here, I'm going to add a very simple grid dot column definitions. Let us split it into two. Now we have two columns. In the first column, just for us to understand that it is a different column, I will change the background color. Brush background, let it be a little bit like this, so that I know that this is a different one. Okay, I'm going to add a stack panel, and inside the stack panel text block, text is equal to hello world, and I will add one more button, or let's say, yeah, button will do that. Content is equal to click me. So this is very simple. I have a text block and this is very big, so let us keep it at 600 and 350. Okay, so now what we have is we have a text block which says hello world, and then we have a button which says click me. This both are coming from main window. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add another project, and this is also going to be a .NET framework, and I'm going to call globalization external, and this one I will right click. I will change the properties and change it to a class library, because this is something like my external external class library or your content library where you keep all your user controls. But when you do something like that, app config or app.xaml doesn't make any sense. This will create error. So let me delete them all, and I will reference my external into my main project, which is the test. Then I will add one more control here, user control, and say external control. And this external control, let us add some color and say blue, like this. Probably this is too much, but something like this. Okay, and I will add one more text block, and let's say foreground is equal to green, font size is equal to 15, horizontal is center and vertical is center, and text is equal to I am external. So there we go. And size, let us say 400. This is design width, so we don't have to worry about it. So at 100%, it looks something like this. Green doesn't make sense. Let us try to change the color. This is okay. And font size, let's make it 29. Okay. So the reason why I'm doing this is this external control is present in a different project, which means like a different DLL file, and that DLL file is now referenced inside our project. So we have one external control which has some text values, and let's go back here, and we need the namespace of the new external project, right? So that is what is it, external. So this is our new namespace, and that namespace contains an external control. So that control will be added into external control will be added into grid.column1. So now we have it here. Let us first run this and see how it looks. If you have noticed, so far I did not add any external libraries, which obviously I'm going to do, but that is totally fine. So we have click me, we have hello world, we have external, that is all fine. So this is completely in English. What if you want to build an application that wants to have different languages that have support for not only English but also other languages? So what do you do in such cases? So there are several solutions and several possibilities available, but we are going to discuss about using a ResxFile. So ResxFile is created using Visual Studio. I'm not sure how externally it could be created, but inside Visual Studio it is pretty much easy. All you need to do is you need to go to add and new item. So in this case, what I will do, I will add a new folder, resources. See, by default, the resources will always be present inside properties. So the reason why I'm doing this in a folder is just to show you that this is a possibility. Let's say lang resource. You can name anything you want. I will just say lang resources. This is totally up to you. You can name anything you want, and let us add a new item. Resource file. You see, this is a ResX file, and I will call it as language.resource. This is as well totally up to you. You can name whatever you want. Okay, we have language restricts, but whereas in the main project I'm going to keep the default ones, like how it will normally be present or normally be added. So this one is fine, but here I'm going to add the reason why I'm adding it is to show the difference between how both the default values and external or like modified values can be handled. So we already have a resource X, so I'm not going to do anything much here, but instead, what is the value? We have two English values here, like one is hello world, one is click me. So we need to have some kind of keyword. So let's call that keyword as click underscore me and hello underscore world. And in English, you say hello world as hello world, and in click me, you say as click me. That's fine. You save this. and let's go to external. What is this? Is a message. Let's call this as message. So in external message, you call it as I am external. It can be anything you want. So now you have added a language English, but how do you make sure that this goes into the main window? The only way is that you need to add a namespace again, as usual. But how does whole this thing works? If you open your resources.designer, this is generated. When you click this, you can see that this is generated by something called a ResxFile code generator. It's a custom tool present in Visual Studio. So when you open up the designer, you could see there are a lot of auto-generated methods and properties, and if you pay close attention, this contains a name called resources. So resources contain a name called resources, and this languages contain a name called language. Okay, and then if you go down, there is one more thing. This is an internal class, which means that this is accessible only inside this DLL, not from outside. That is fine. And if you go further down, you could see that the properties that you have added, like click me, hello world, those were also got added as a string or a property. And then the value that you have written here, this value whatever you have written is now handled via resource manager, which gets the string and returns it back. So these are all auto generated code. You don't have to do anything. All you need to do is add a RSX file and then add these two things, or whatever, how much ever you want. So how do we access it? As usual, we need to identify where it is present. In this case, it is present in globalization.test.properties. Properties is your folder name. So the namespace is globalization test properties and then resources. If you go up to external, it is present in globalization external lang resources. So this is the reason why I had a folder to show you a difference. So where you add the file does make a difference because the namespace gets changed according to that. So how do I access my value? There are so many ways of doing it. The first way is to get the namespace. So first let me directly add the namespace, XML namespace, and then what is this resource, right? Let's call it as resource and properties. So globalization test properties. So now I got globalization.test.properties, inside which I have a file called resources. So resx. Okay, now let me try to change this click me using the namespace that we added. So we know that this is resx, and resx goes to properties, and inside properties we have resources. And if I open up the resources, provides a lot of static values like static culture, static hello world, static click me. But if you remember, see this is an internal class. Okay, let it be there. So x static res, and I currently see only settings. I do not see resources, but that's fine. What is resources? Resources is nothing but your file name, resources.resx. Resources dot click me. When you say click me, you can now see that instead of the value, it is updated. But let us try to run and see if this works or not. Even though it works in the design or run design time, it threw an exception during runtime. It says that it cannot be converted into blah 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 blah. So just close this. Why? Because your resources is internal. Usually it should be internal because you don't want external classes to access your resources. But now what we do, open up, change this to public. Now you are making it public so that external classes can also access your resources. Maybe you could have a lot of things, and every external library which references your DLL can access it. It's totally up to you how you want to design. But now there we go. Click me, and I will go back here to my main window, and I will also say hello world. This one, ecstatic press resources hello world. Now you do the same process to your uh, hello world is now coming here. Click me is coming here. If you want to see, click me like uh, process me, and hello world is like welcome. Let's try now. Process me welcome. Okay, this is all totally fine because we are only dealing with see, so far I did not touch the external. I will go back there shortly. So far we are only discussing about one language, right? What about I want another language? Let's say this language is going to be resources dot I don't know. I don't speak the languages, so let's say TA. TA stands for Tamil. If you want to know, like each two-digit word or three-digit letter stands for different languages. TA, D, CH, ZH, whatever it is. So currently, for our case, this TA stands for Tamil. So what I will do, I will add some values here. Now you see that the code behind are all gone. And here, click me. I will say, this basically means that touch me. And here I will say, this is basically means greetings, something like that. So we have something on startup of the application. Before even startup, I will just say thread. Sorry, still didn't change my language. Thread dot current dot culture. Current culture is equal to culture info. Wow, culture info is not here, so I will just say using system dot globalization. Culture info is equal to culture info dot create specific culture info, and the name is TA. So this will create the culture Tamil. So TA stands for Tamil India. If you find something else like D, it stands for something I don't know. FR stands for French, obviously. So there are a lot of different cultures, but you can always do a search and find different cultures like this. ES, I don't know what is ES. It's here. ES stands for, I believe it should be Espion, Spanish, something like that. So info and thread dot current UI culture is equal to info. So on startup, we are specifying that start the application with Tamil, and if this particular TA is found, like the culture ResxFile file is found, then load the values from here. That's what we are saying. There you go. It has started, but instead of, since we have set the culture as TA, which is Tamil, it goes to my solution folder and tries to find the file resources with .ta, and then since it found that, it managed to load this. Now this is how we normally do this, add a resource file and then add different languages, and whatever you have here, you just rename them here, add some values here, and on startup of the application you change your culture, and here you do this with this one. So now, does this method have any drawbacks? It has a lot of advantages and a lot of, I cannot say lot of, it has advantages and it has disadvantages. Advantages that it is quite straightforward and simple, and it also is fairly easy to handle. Since you have this resources here, let's say you have hello world, right? If you change the name, like this particular key is not present, then when you try to build it, it will fail, saying that this resource is not present because you have renamed it. So it will be easy for you to identify your errors during compile time. So this is one of the benefit of using the simple approach. So you know that okay, now it has built. So compile time, you don't have any error. Disadvantage is that since it is a static variable, changing or modifying the language during runtime is impossible. So what happens is each time when you start up, you need to change the language to something. So this is totally not what you want. Not only this, but whenever you change the culture, you also need to propagate the same methods and changes to all the other external libraries that you have referenced. It will not do by its own. Let's try. Let's try here. Okay, let's try to add a combo box inside this stack panel. Let's try to add one combo box. Combo box X name is combo box language, and if selection changed is where am I? Selection changed. When selection gets changed, you do something. So let's go here. Before that, when you initialize your component, combo box dot language dot items dot add let's say English, and combo box dot language dot items dot add let's say Tamil. So two languages are here. Whenever the language gets changed, what I'm going to do the same thing that I did here. I will just for the sake of simplicity, this app is a partial class. Let's add a static. Will I be able to access app from here? App. Yeah, I'm able to access app. So I will add a static method here. Static void change culture, and then I will say string code. Okay, just cut this off, and let's take the code here. And on startup, change culture English. So let's start with English first. And during runtime, app dot change culture. Wow, this is private static. So public static. App dot change culture. Combo box language dot selected value as string. So it should either of the one English or Tamil. So let us try to see this now whether it works or not during runtime. So we start with English and then we change to Tamil. So what happens here on debug? It changed to Tamil, but we still remain in English. We do not make any modification. If you go want to check here, you see you are creating the culture using English, and when you change to Tamil, you change the culture to TAIN, which is Tamil Nadu, Tamil India. The code you have given is TA, but by default, there are like around, I believe, if I'm not wrong, 286 languages present inside the culture info, and TA Tamil is at 236, I believe. So TA Tamil, it came here, and then we have it, but we do not see the language getting modified dynamically. And so by now you should have by now you should have a better idea about how globalization works. Like during runtime, you change the culture and you change the language, and then everything looks fine. But the problem here is Dynamically you are not able to change it, or during runtime you are not able to change it. There are more than one way to resolve this issue. Different people have come up with different solutions, and so many solutions are available online. So far we did not use any external library. At this point, I have implemented a easy solution in Haley library, which I'm going to explain now. That is pretty much straightforward. That is not the perfect as well. That also might have its own disadvantages. I will explain that, but this resolves our issue with runtime globalization. So now let me manage Naked packages for solution. So I will add Haley. So the globalization is present in MVVM, not in WPF. So if you are only going to use MVVM, that is totally fine. There we go. We have Haley MVVM installed. So let me go to my view here. So I don't need this resx anymore. I will just remove it. And first benefit of this is you don't need to make it as public. You can keep it internal. So save this up. So your resources doesn't, it can be public, it's totally up to you. It can be internal, it can be public, but in the previous method it needed to be public. So you need to expose it or else it will not be available. Now I'm making it internal. That is fine. We don't even need to modify anything here. We can just keep it as it is. And let me close it up and go to main window. Add your namespace, Haley MVVM. So Haley MVVM. So instead of x static, because x static means that it is a static value and it doesn't change throughout the application. You're going to make it as binding. Sorry, you don't need to bind. You need to just call hm, and inside hm you have a markup extension called lang. Just call lang. That's it. And let me call the lang here. Now the only disadvantage, as far as I know, the only disadvantage that I could see is you need to know your key. Like if you give a wrong key, it will not show you that the key doesn't exist. This was an advantage in the default or the normal ecstatic method, where when you give a key which is not present during compile time, you will find error. But here you need to be careful with that one. But don't worry, even if the key is not present, it will not throw an error, it will just return you the key. So hello world 2. So you know that the text block is hello world 2, and click me is click me. Okay, so this is the only drawback. You need to remember your keyword. It will not show up. Or else what happens is, if you enter some keyword like hello world, this will just show as hello world. It will not get the value because the key is not present. So you need to ensure that whatever you key you put in here is present there. So this is a straightforward approach. Install Haley MVVM and then call hlang, and from here whatever values that are present inside your resources, you can directly call them in here. But how does the application or the Haley MVVM knows that this globalization test has subscribed or is registering itself? So there is one more step. Wherever you are calling or on startup or wherever you go, so you don't need this change culture concept to be like this. You don't have to worry about all those things. You don't have to. So the first step is you have something called inside Haley.utils. Using Haley.utils, you call something langutils. Langutils dot you can change culture or you can register yourself. So what am I doing here? I'm registering myself here. So when you say register, you have different options, like you can give translation override, you can give the fully qualified resource name. But at present, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to say like, okay, register me. That's it, register. So when I call this method, what happens? The whichever DLL I'm present in will be registered inside langutils, and then langutils will send information to the markup extension, which is this lang. So once you register using langutils, then lang will know that this assembly has some resources, and this key will be searched for in the resource file. I will explain about that in detail shortly, but as of now, this is all you need. Let us try first to see whether it works or not. At least we are able to get the click me and then the new window. Uh, Let me remove it up. So we have now the process me and then welcome, but we did not do anything for change culture. So that's what I'm going to do now. Langutils dot change culture and the code, whatever. You can send two things. You can send the culture info or you can send the code. I'm just going to send the code. Let's try now. Change the language to Tamil, and let us remove the breakpoint. So there you go. You can change them at runtime. So based upon that, you can change. So what has happened? So you have something called the Haley MVVM have got something called languitils, which is the place where you will register your application. That's fine. And from the UI end, you have something called a lang, which is your markup extension. So you need two things. From when you call from your markup, you use lang, and then when you register it, you use langutils, and that's it. And you want to change your culture, use langutils to change your culture and send in the code. So in the back end, what happens is whenever the culture is changed, then the langutils will get all the langs from the UI or the XAML and then try to see whether this hello world 2 is present in the particular resources or not, and then it returns it. If for some reason the hello world 2 is not present, like the keyword itself is not present, then what happens is it is not returned, just the keyword alone is present. That's it. Okay, there you go. So you need to take care about ensuring that whatever key that you put in here has a value. Now, so far we are doing only from one end, right? Now, the same thing I'm going to do here in external control. I'm going to put my same thing, helium PVM, and in IM external, I'm going to put helium PVM lang, and what is my message. What am I doing here? I need to first register this control, right? So I will add a small class here. Class. I can do it in two ways. I can directly create a new class which I can call from here and blah blah blah. But I can do it in another way as well. So when I am opening it up, I will not only register myself, I will also register another assembly which is this one, globalization dot external. So um, type of I'm sorry, type of external control dot assembly. So what I'm doing here is I'm just saying that get the type of the external control and its assembly. So register this assembly. That's fine. Let us try now. So this assembly is also now registered. So message is message. I'm not getting any value so far. We need to find out why. So it is straightforward visible. That is the reason why I added a new folder called languages and resources. By default, when you do not add anything but you follow the same properties and resources, everything looks fine. But in our case, we have changed the name as folder. It is not present in properties, and the resx file also is called language. So in such cases, not only is the assembly, you also need to give something else called the folder name, so it is the fully qualified resource file name. Make it down here, fully qualified resource file name. What is my fully qualified resource file name? I need to get my default namespace. Default namespace followed by the folder name lang resources followed by the resx file, which is language. Okay, that's it. I'm external, so now we have got it. It doesn't change to Tamil because it doesn't have the Tamil counterpart yet. Now I'm going to do something. I can add a Tamil resx file and then I can change that, or else I can do something else as well. That is called translation override. Override, override callback. Let's say. So what happens is, before the translation or after the translation happens, it will send us the key and then the value. If you are happy with the value, you can return the same value like return value, or else if you are not happy with the value, you can change something. So for whenever something happens for the external control, if culture info dot info dot you have name, you have a two-letter ISO language name. Two-letter ISO language name is, I know for a fact, that is TA, then return. I don't have Tamil translation yet. Obviously, we're not going to do something like this, but just for fun, we are going to see how it works. So I am external is the value for English, US, and we know for a fact that this is EN and we are not going to return anything. That's fine. But when you change to Tamil, what happens? I don't have a Tamil translation yet. Why? Because we are intercepting it. Let me put a dot here. You change to English. You change to Tamil. That's it. So this is one of the other advantage. Using langutils method, you can also override the callback. You don't need like for some reason if you want to return some values based upon the key as well. You have the key and then the value based upon the key and then the culture info and value. You can play with this and you can return your own values to the UI. But we don't need the override callback here, so I will just say return value, or I will just remove it here. So instead of this, I will add one more language and I will say .d.resx. Okay, I'm sorry, this is not D, this is T, Tamil. So Tamil message, I'm external. Now, really all. I am external. I'm an external person, obviously it denotes a person, so that's okay. Let's try now. So it's in English and it's in Tamil, so we can now switch to different languages. And the benefit is you are having your own resources here and you are still keeping it as internal. You did not change it to public, and the internal resources of your DLL is applied there, and your resources are applied here, and you are still able to manage globalization. So now this is fine. And what if you have a common DLL, like there are places where you will be adding an external DLL file, and you will put so many commonly called methods like repeated questions like, do you want to override this? So it's a question which you are going to show in your dialog. And in such cases and in and in such cases you don't want to add the same key and value in every resource file. So what do you do? So you can do several things. For instance, you can add a new project and then you put like common resources and something like that. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to show you a sample of how an external library could be used. The key here is a resource provider key. How do I do that? I'm going to go into my main window. I'm going to add another text block and say text is equal to hm lang external key. So this is just a placeholder, but you can enter a key from an external DLL file, like the key called message. You can enter in anywhere, and it doesn't mean that you need to reference your external to your test. As long as this external is registered into lang-utils like this, as long as it is registered, then you don't need to reference the project. You can even reference circular way, like external doesn't have test reference, you can use the test here and you can use external here. I will shortly show that as well. The message is here, but by default it will try to look into the key message inside where it is called. It is called in globalization.test, so it will try to find a message inside there, but it doesn't have a message there, so it's always going to stay. You need to show it a way, like where you need to find the message. So we have something called resource provider, or I'm sorry, resource key. What? It's not a resource key, it's a provider key. Provider key. So who is the provider? You need to give the assembly name. Remember, this is not the default namespace. This is your assembly name, the DLL file name. You need to give the DLL file name. Like globalization.external is my DLL file name, and this is where inside this DLL find the message for me. Hello, I am external and I am Velial, now Velial. You see? So now what happens here? This third message is from an external library or external class where you're using it up. So this way you can easily put your resources in a separate project or a DLL file, and you can reference them, like commonly used repeated words, or you can even use it something like this. That's totally up to you. Now I'm going to show something. In the external class, I'm going to add one more text block, and I will say this one vertical alignment is top. It goes to the top, and size is going to be 12, and or maybe 15. It's very small, and I'm going to call hello world 2 from provider key is globalization.test. So why am I doing this? Because the globalization.external does not have any reference to globalization.test. So it doesn't know anything about globalization.test, but still you will be able to retrieve the value because every value is now registered inside lang utils. That's the reason why, even though it is not present, you will still be able to see welcome and you will still be able to see vanakkam. So this is how you will be able to handle your globalization using Haley. And that's it. Just write your comments if you have any questions about this. I hope this should be pretty much enough to handle any kind of projects. And going forward, we will also add different features into Haley languages, but as of now, this is self-sufficient. Thank you for your time.